Hey everyone, Kevin here, back. Lecture 28, Photosynthesis, video number 1. Let's get going. So, we're going to talk big picture first, getting energy from food versus energy from the sun via photosynthesis. Then, what is photosynthesis and what are the light reactions in photosynthesis? We won't do all these in the first video, but we will do these 3 topics as part of lecture 28. So the big picture, energy from food versus photosynthesis. So here's what we've talked about so far, of course, oxidative phosphorylation. This is how we make energy. This, of course, is the end of central metabolism. This is a really nice look at the electron transport chain and chemiosmosis and the use of ATP synthase for making energy. So hopefully this is all very clear. If it's not, let me know. So electrons are harvested from food. We dump them on NADH and we take the electrons to the electron transport chain where oxygen is reduced to water. Okay, we spent a lot of time talking about that. Electrons are dumped on on oxygen to make water. And we make ATP from the electron transport chain. That's how we get energy from food. Okay, what about photosynthesis? In this case, we actually oxidize water to make oxygen. We take electrons from water and we produce oxygen. And that's how we have oxygen in our atmosphere. It comes from photosynthesis. So electrons are harvested from water by oxidizing water. There is an electron transport chain related to photosynthesis, just like there is related to oxidative phosphorylation. That electron transport chain is used to develop a proton gradient and make ATP. The electron transport chain also dumps the electrons that we harvested from water to make NADPH, a relative of NADH. Those electrons are used to reduce carbon dioxide to sugar. So, remember when we got energy from food, we oxidized glucose and made CO2. Now we are taking electrons and reducing CO2 to make glucose. So we're going in the other direction. So the chain or the cycle, the loop is closed. Photosynthesis takes the energy of the sun, uses that to pull electrons from water to make oxygen. Those electrons flow through or via NADPH to reduce CO2 to make sugar. If it wasn't for the energy of the sun, the cycle wouldn't start because we need that sugar produced by photosynthesis to provide food for us, which is what we've studied up until now. So here are NADH and NADPH. Very similar structures, as you can see. They differ just by that phosphate group. Why do we even have 2 molecules? Because they're used in different parts of our metabolism. NADPH is the electron shuttle in photosynthesis. It's also the electron shuttle that we use in many anabolic reactions in our body. NADH is the electron shuttle we use in oxidative phosphorylation or in central metabolism. It's used in many of the catabolic reactions in our body. So we don't want to, when we're shuttling electrons for anabolic reactions, to turn around and run those back through the electron transport chain. We could, but we would just be running in circles. So we distinguish electrons being carried to the electron transport chain from those being used for anabolic reactions by putting them on different carriers. NADH in the former for oxidative phosphorylation, NADPH for the latter for anabolic reactions. Photosynthesis consists of two parts, light reactions and the Calvin cycle. So we're going to talk first about light reactions. Those happen in the light, as you imagine. It's where we harvest the energy of light to oxidize water, or sometimes we say to split water into hydrogen and oxygen. The Calvin cycle sometimes is referred to as the dark reactions because they are not dependent on sunlight. However, if we don't have sunlight, the Calvin cycle eventually is going to stop because the Calvin cycle is dependent on the products of the light reactions. So photosynthesis is in two parts. The first part, overall, we take light energy and we convert it to chemical energy. So we said that we take the energy of the sun and we make sugar, carbohydrates. The two parts are first the light reactions, and those capture the energy of sunlight. We remove electrons from water, or we split water, and that's where we make oxygen. And we also harvest the protons, and those are deposited, or we use those in making NADPH, reducing that to NADP to NADPH, among other uses of the protons. And so we make ATP, two main products, ATP and NADPH. And NADPH is used in anabolic pathways, as I mentioned, and it is the electron carrier of photosynthesis. And I mentioned NADH we use in catabolic pathways. Consider why photosynthesis is an anabolic pathway. Remember, anabolic pathways build things up. Here, we're building up sugar. Second part of photosynthesis is the Calvin cycle. Those are also known as the dark reactions. And we use the NADPH and the ATP that we produced in the light reactions to fix CO2 from the air. Fixing is a term that means we just take that CO2 gas and we lock those carbons into sugar, and we are reducing those carbons to make glucose. So we take the CO2 from the air and we make carbohydrates. Photosynthesis is done in chloroplasts. Those are the organelles in the cell that are shown here, the green organelles. And we've got a lot of things happening there. We'll look at the insides of these in just a sec. You can see that water molecules here are coming in to the chloroplasts, and oxygen is going to be produced as a result. Note some of the other organelles in the cell. Of course, we have the nucleus over here and the endoplasmic reticulum here, just like we do normally in animal cells. We have a vacuole in a plant cell that is key and is large in a plant cell because it helps maintain the rigidity of the cell. You can fill that with water. The cell can fill it with water and help maintain the rigidity of the cell and the rigidity of the plant. Cells also have mitochondria. So mitochondria is shown here. And if you're not making energy from the sunlight, you have mitochondria there that can make energy at times when sunlight is not available. Here's what the chloroplasts look like. So key parts of it. So we've got the thylakoids here. And the thylakoids are contained by a membrane. And we will pump protons across that membrane, as we will see. So thylakoids are stacked in a granum, and you can see a picture of it here in a chloroplast, and it's the cartoon version at the top of the slide. Key parts, in addition, are the stroma. The stroma is this part outside the thylakoid, and the thylakoid space is the part inside the thylakoid. So keep that in mind because we are going to be pumping protons between the two, between the stroma and the thylakoid space, and of course then letting protons flow back with their concentration gradient to produce ATP, just like happens in oxidative phosphorylation. So there's a real nice parallel. So the chloroplasts themselves have an outer membrane, an inner membranes, and an inner membrane, and therefore an intermembrane space between the two. But the intermembrane space is not used the same as it is in the mitochondrion. In the chloroplast, the pumping happens between the thylakoid space, the pumping of protons between the thylakoid space and the stroma. That's it for video 1. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in video number 2 of lecture 28.